In this particular vineyard that we're standing in at this point, here's a very active growing shoot, for example, and it still has a very active growing tip here at the end. The tendrils are very adhered to the cane, which indicates the fact that it doesn't really need water at this point in time. The berries are still sizing up, and there's a lot of fruit on these canes here. This trellis system is a GDC, which stands for Geneva Double Curtain, developed in Geneva, New York, as a means of growing Concord grapes, but we've adapted it for wine grapes here on the North Coast. It's a way of spreading out some of the fruit, and if you get down, you can kind of take a look through the canopy and through the wires how the fruit is displayed. The idea is the shoots are supposed to grow downwards with the fruit being up. But Cabernet is a very rigid grower. In other words, it can grow pretty much upright without too much trellising. We have very large diameter canes here for the size of the vines. To me, these are pretty large. The canes also are in excess of 3 to 4 feet in length and probably approach more like 6 or 7 feet. And as you look up in here, there's a tremendous amount of laterals, a tremendous amount of second crop at this point that is produced on these laterals that should be removed, because again, that takes away from the overall ripening of the primary crop, the first crop, which we have here below the cordon. So if the vine is trying to put energy into ripening this and sizing this second crop at the same time as focusing and trying to mature and put this into the ripening mode of these lower clusters, this vine is working pretty hard. It's got a lot going on, and I think my suggestion would be to remove all these laterals, open up the canopy, get some sunlight down inside of here, and definitely remove as much of the second crop as possible. Adding more water and nutrients is not necessary in my opinion. I think these vines are very deep colored green. There's a really nice green hue to it, a massive leaves, a lot of laterals that are actually shading and covering the primary fruit that's even down in here. My theory is if you can't see the crop without moving leaves and laterals, then the sun and the spray also cannot get to that fruit. And in order to get good color and good ripeness into this fruit, more leafing should be done in here to get better exposure. Here's an example again of another cane that's probably in excess of 6 feet. It's very actively growing. There's no means for it to slow down. I'm pulling pretty hard on these tendrils. There's no indication from this that they need any water at this point. You can see these leaves are very light in color. Again, very actively growing. They're very lucid and growing very, very quickly. Here's another cane behind me. Shoot, I should say, another shoot that's behind me doing the same thing, as well as the one up there and the one behind my hat. As we walk down through the rows here, we pick up that these canes had been cut. They're cut in about approximately 12 or 14 bud positions from the spur, or about maybe 2 feet. Cut rather short. Very harsh cutting on the canes, just to allow access down here so people can walk and do their work and pass through with the tractor. To me, this vineyard is out of balance. It really needs to come within more balance, and a possible means of doing that is having a permanent cover crop that allows for the excessive soil moisture to be taken up by the sponge, by the cover crop. A different method of pruning, leaving more fruit buds, maybe some disposable canes here where there's long canes of pruning time that are left and tied to the drip system to help utilize and a lot of the energy in the spring when these vines become very active. That would also slow these vines down and minimize a lot of these laterals, minimize the 3 clusters. And this is one of the suggestions I have for the winery this year, is that when we come in here and prune in February, that we leave 2 to 3, maybe 4 long canes that will actually tie backwards down to the drip wire. And then I call them disposable canes because in June or July early, we'll take them off, cut them off the vines, throw them in the center of the road to be cultivated in. And again, it's just more opportunity for the vine to have fruit buds. We're not looking for more fruit, but are ways to minimize maybe a lot of the hand labor that goes on here as far as extra leafing, extra lateral removal, extra cluster removal, because the vines have a huge capacity to produce a very large crop. And these would be good tools, in my opinion, to think about. An example would be right here. This cane is coming down in a downward position. It arises from this 2-bud spur, and actually when pruning season comes, this will be removed completely. So why not take this thing as a 15, 18 bud cane and just tie it to this drip wire and cut it approximately there, and then in June or July just remove the whole thing. Again, if we have all these buds with fruit on them, and you know you're not going to harvest that fruit, but it's a way to help control the vigor of these vines. Another good measure would be not to irrigate until the vines are really stressed for water, or we know we have very hot, dry temperatures coming. Allow the fruit to size normally and develop at a much more rapid pace. Adding more water just slows down the ripening process at this point in time, increases the berry size significantly, and not necessarily makes the best wine, the quality of wine that is desired by the winery. Managing the irrigation system, managing your vines, your vine control, all of these are important factors in a vineyard.